Hey, what's going on, wrestling community? Today it is Monday, August 30th, 2021, and you are currently tuned into the Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast. If it is your first time checking out the show, awesome, welcome aboard. We got two shows that we host every week on this channel. We got a Monday edition where we cover NXT and AEW Dynamite, and we also have the Friday edition where we cover AEW Rampage, NWA Empowerrr, and any other weekend events, shows, or news bulletins that are worth discussing. Before we get into the show and run down the events of this past weekend, I got a couple footnotes I got to get out of the way first. Make sure you subscribe, rate the video down below, and most importantly, comment. It's probably the best way to help and support this channel and make it grow is by leaving a comment down below. Anything on your mind, it'd be great to hear from you. Whatever's floating through your brain right now. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. In addition to viewing the show on YouTube, you guys can also check out the show on Rumble, and I will be sure to leave a link to that down below as well. It's basically a secondary platform where you can check out my podcast if you decide that you don't want to watch it on YouTube for whatever reason. I'm always sure that I upload my content to a secondary platform just in the case something occurs where a video gets flagged or taken down here. At least I have another location for where my content can be stored. So definitely go support me over on Rumble as well. I'm also currently writing content for the Chairshot website. I post 4 articles each week, most of which are opinion pieces or media coverages, depending on what goes on in wrestling news throughout the week. If you guys want to check out those articles and support me there, I will be sure to leave a link in the most recent article that I write in the comments section, so you can click the link and read that on the website at your convenience. And I think that is all my initial plugs here. Yep, that is it. So let us get into the show. As you can tell by the title, we're going to be covering Rampage from Friday, August 27th. And then I will be covering the 2 back-to-back NWA events from Saturday and Sunday night. So, coming off that horrible episode of Dynamite on Wednesday, and yes, people, the show was horrible. You can stop sugarcoating and making excuses for it. Regardless, the show was much, much better. Still had its handful of issues, but I can at least say this. It's only an hour, and if anything, this show does basically force AEW's hand to prioritize what they feature each week. May not always be the best material per se, but they also won't overcrowd the show with job talent, unimportant programs, and meaningless crap either. God damn it, they put Jericho back on the commentary booth. And they are still doing this 4-man commentary team. Maybe I should just accept this is going to be their format and they're not going to change it. I have no clue why they think congesting the commentary booth is a good decision. I've been a wrestling fan a long time. I have never seen a commentary team of more than 2 people work. Didn't work in WCW, never worked in WWE. And keep in mind, those 2 companies had a max of 3 people working the commentary at a given time. This show has 4. And it's not even like any of them really have good chemistry with each other either. It's just, there's a whole lot going on. There's too much talking over one another. There's too much bantering that goes on. Sometimes there are periods where no one's talking at all because someone's waiting for someone else to speak. It's just not my cup of tea. Oh, yeah, and did I mention they put Jericho back at the booth? It has to be a rib at this point. So the opener was Lucha Bros versus the Jurassic Express in the Tournament Eliminator Finals. We did get entrance cutting here, which I'm usually not a fan of, especially when the team that won the match is the team that got their entrance cut. I'll say this up front. Rey Fenix does a lot of incredible shit. That springy stuff he does off the ropes is such a spectacle every time I see it. And it just sucks that 80% of the people on that roster do the exact same stuff, because if Phoenix was the only guy that did all the agile, high-flying lucha spots, it would actually mean something. God forbid it would be more impactful. Anyway, the match was, well, it was a combination of two things. It was every AEW tag match involving the Lucha Bros I've ever seen, and it was every AEW wrestling match that you've ever seen. It was move, 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 commercial break, move, 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 finish. I really could not recall any of the details when it was over. There were a lot of typical complaints that I always have about tag matches in AEW, where guys are just randomly allowed to go in and out and the ref never does anything to enforce the rules. They kicked out of virtually every move in the book. My increasing and passionate hatred for the Canadian Destroyer grows each and every week. I never want to see that move again, and it really should just be done away with. We also got the stereotypical wrestling allegory of let's stand outside the ring like jackasses while the wrestler takes 15 minutes to set up a dive spot. And fast forward to the end, Penta and Phoenix did a bunch of super kicks to Luchasaurus, which was after he kicked out of a Canadian Destroyer at 1, by the way. Fuck off. And Penta Phoenix hit him with some move that Excalibur said they used in PWG at one point, and I could not have given a fuck less. So they are indeed going with the Lucha Bros versus the Bucks in the cage at All Out, which actually will be interesting if you think about it, because Pac is also wrestling Andrade on that show, and they've been doing teasing with Andrade trying to recruit Penta and Phoenix into whatever his little group is. So if the idea is to break up the Death Triangle, I actually could see a case where the Lucha Bros beat the Bucks for the belts, Andrade beats Pac, and then you do the eventual split on TV. Not saying that's what they'll do, but it would be logical. We'll just say that. So the segment was what it was. Bucks also did a run in post-match, and I would normally be gravely offended by Marco Stunt being the one to run off any pro wrestler, but considering it was the Bucks in this case, I will make an exception. We had Miro come out beating the crap out of Fuego del Sol, and the only reason this was awesome was that while Miro was beating Fuego down to the ring, they kept his music playing. Anyway, so he got in the ring, said that he would forgive Fuego for, I don't know, I guess weaseling out a contract from Tony or something. And then he yanks his mask off. And if they gave me any reason to care about Fuego del Sol, this might have actually meant something, but as it turns out, Fuego's had one match on Rampage. He got his ass kicked in a minute and a half, and I merely saw this as Miro just beating up a geek. So this brought out Eddie Kingston to make a cough save. And those aren't my words, by the way. Those are the announcer's words. Yes, after Miro spent 2 minutes kicking Fuego down the ramp, throwing him in the ring, ripping his mask off, and kicking his head off, then Eddie Kingston decided now would be a good time to run down and make a save. Great babyface. And as I mentioned on the Dynamite recap, I still don't know why Miro was wrestling Kingston for the title, but you know what? I like Kingston. Sounds like a good pay-per-view match. At this point, you got, what, less than a week before the show. Just fuck it, throw it on there. Who cares? And by the end, we end up having like the 83rd pull apart in AEW in the last 2 weeks. It's actually starting to become pretty comical at this point. Ali and Ty Conti wrestled a shitty match. And if you did not see my Dynamite review from Wednesday, you can hear my brief thoughts on where I currently stand with women's wrestling in 2021. And Don't you worry, because we'll get to that a little bit later on in the show here. We had Excalibur running down the All Out card in the most cartoonish manner possible. We had a side-splitting video package to hype up Brian Cage versus Power Hobbs for Dynamite. And the entire video was pretty much, Hobbs is big, he's a powerhouse, and most of all, he's big. I'm not fucking kidding. That was the entire video. I still have no idea why Cage split from Team Taz. I still have no idea why they're fighting. I have no idea why I should care about the FTW title. And, oh yes, most importantly, I don't care, period. They did another one of those split screen deals with Mark Henry interviewing the Elite, Christian and Kazarian. And the whole purpose of the interview was to essentially let you know ahead of time that Kenny Omega wasn't going to get in the ring to wrestle Christian tonight. Yeah. Anyway, the main event was Kenny Omega and his goon versus Christian Cage and Frankie Kazarian. And by the way, people, I'm not trying to be facetious about that. That's the story. Brandon Cutler sucks. He's completely worthless. And he's literally just there to be a punching bag. This is our world title picture right now, people. It's a lot of things, but it's just so WWE. So bad. And not to mention, you throw that Michael Wakalaka dumbass in there, and you pretty much got J&J Security 2.0. The only difference is at least Jamie Noble and Joey Mercury had talent. Anyway, match was 25% wrestling, 75% comedy, and unfortunately the comedy sucked, so in retrospect, so did most of the match. And look, I'm not a Kenny Omega fan by any stretch of the imagination, but I mean, serious question. Is this really what they're going with right now for him as the heel champion? He's the cookie cutter, stereotypical pussy heel that runs away from fights. It's not even like he's running away from someone like a Brian Cage or a Lance Archer or someone twice his size. He's backing down from fucking Christian Cage. Look, say what you want about the whole Elite deal. If this is your flavor of what pro wrestling should be, that's cool. Clearly, we'll just never see eye to eye on what makes pro wrestling believable. But for me, what they're doing with Omega right now is just, it's not effective. Omega should be booked like Ric Flair. Like a button-down, well-dressed dude that takes what he does seriously. Maybe sometimes a little off the wall crazy, maybe over the top personality-wise, maybe a party goer at times who loves the ladies. God forbid Kenny Omega would ever get love from the ladies. But when it comes bell time, you know that you're going to get someone who takes everything he does seriously. And yeah, he might grab tights, he might take some shortcuts, but at the end of the day, he takes his ass kicking like a man. He sells and makes his opponents look good, and he works like a pro wrestler should. And even if he wins in the end, you keep building the anticipation and suspense for whoever it is that eventually beats him for the title. I still presume it's going to be Hangman Page at some point, but you never know. But this whole thing with him backing down from a 46, 47-year-old Christian whose prime peaked over 10 years ago, this is just not productive. Him associating with his pack of goofballs, acting like a middle school delinquent, dressing like he buys his clothes off the discount rack at JCPenney, cowering and backing down from fights. That is not how your world champion should be booked to look or act. I want to see the Kenny Omega that had that fucking fantastic Iron Man match with Pac last year. I want to see the Kenny Omega that wrestled those alleged 7-star matches with Okada and New Japan. Not this horse crap. You want to be seen as anti-WWE? Stop doing WWE shit. Because that's what this garbage is right now. It's WWE light. It's Seth Rollins and his group of clowns being made to look like chumps on television each week. It's not compelling, it's not cool, it's dumb. Doesn't make me want to see someone beat Omega for the title. It makes me wish he'd get off my TV with his elite group and go back to New Japan. So there's my AEW soapbox tangent for the week. And again, this is coming from someone that's not a Kenny Omega fan. But I do want to buy this guy as a credible world champion. And I do want to see this guy actually have good matches. Because I've seen Kenny Omega have some good matches before. It just, they're so few and far between with all the stuff he's been doing on TV recently. It's just, it's terrible. Horrible. Anyway, despite how it may have come across in the report, I actually didn't think the show was all that bad. It was miles better than whatever that pig dung was we got on Dynamite this past Wednesday. Like I said at the beginning, it's only an hour long. Generally, it's easy to sit through, and like even if the shows aren't great, I don't feel like I waste my time watching. Whereas when a show starts to bleed into that 2-hour frame and you start to see the show get filled with undercard dorks, it starts to be a bit much. So, the All Out show is, it's next Sunday, right? Yeah, I think so. September 5th is coming up. Yeah, today's the 30th. Yep, it is. It is next Sunday. I mean, the card's coming together a little bit better. I'm not too stoked about some of the content on there, but I'm looking forward to some of the stuff. The Punk Allen match, I talked about how much I'm really looking forward to that. The Omega Cage match, while I haven't been a fan of how they're building it up, they did have that good TV match on Rampage a couple weeks ago, so it should at least be a quality pay-per-view match. The Kingston Miro match should be good. As much as I could really give a crap less about the Buck Fucks, and I wish they go piss up a rope, I guess to an extent I am interested to see what they're going to do in the cage match with the Lucha Bros. I don't really remember the last cage match that I saw in wrestling that I would say I was really looking forward to, but that match has the potential to give us one of those spectacle moments we come to expect out of AEW, so I guess we'll see. So moving along here, I'm going to talk about this NWA Empowerrr show from Saturday night. I had an article that I had composed a couple days ago for the Chair Shot, and unfortunately I was not able to get it submitted before the deadline, so my original article did not get posted. However, I did go back and I did some revisions, essentially changed the title, but kept the body and the content that I originally wrote. The article subject was about the NWA Empowerrr event, and long story short, my initial composition talked about how there was very little intrigue, very little fanfare or hype going into the show, the little discussion that there was amongst wrestling fans, and I basically laid out a thesis on the perception of women's wrestling in 2021. If you want to check out my updated version, I'll make sure I post the link down below so you can check it out on the Chair Shot. Relatively short read. It's not that long at all. I did watch the show in its entirety, so I'm going to very briefly run down the card from top to bottom. I'm going to share my brief thoughts on each match, and I'm just going to move on with the NWA 73 show, because I really don't have a whole lot to say about the show as a whole. I can tell you up front, there was a lot of crying, which I guess is to be expected with female nature. The opening three-way with Kylie Rae, Diamante, and Chick Tormenta, I think that was her name. Hell if I know. Hey, I think I just mentioned Kylie on my NXT report. And as it turns out, there is a difference between her and Kaylee Ray. They are not the same person. Anyway, the match was just okay. Most of it was very clunky. Most of the spots looked pretty choreographed. Yeah, not very good. Women's tag match with the Hex versus Hell on Heels was passable when Marty and Kay were on offense. Wretchedly bad when the other girls were on offense. Allison Kay, I remember watching an Impact a few years ago. I think Marty Bell was there too. Wasn't she doing a thing with Taryn and Mia Yim? They had like some faction or something like that. I forget what it was called. Apparently, this was a semifinal for the revamped women's tag titles, which had basically been defunct since I think 1983 when the WWF bought the rights to the championship. I think Velvet Sky called this a brutal match on commentary when it was over, and yep, that sounds about accurate. The other semifinal qualifier was the Free Babes versus Red Velvet and Kylan King. Jesus Christ, now we got Kylie and we got Kylin to keep track of. I mean, obviously I've seen a handful of Red Velvet matches. In fact, I just saw her wrestle on Dynamite last week. She's not really good, but, in comparison to the other girls in this match, she practically looked like Ric Flair out there. Kylin was solid too. She at least wrestled like she didn't have two left feet. This one was mostly inoffensive. They at least bothered to tell some kind of story with one of the heels working over the smaller Velvet for most of it, but they really needed a video package or something for a lot of these matches, because I've never seen like half these girls on the show before. Especially I've never seen a Free Babes match before. So I had no idea who anyone was in here except for Red Velvet. I mean, even Kylan King, they said, had wrestled on AEW, and I guess she's only been on Dark because this is the first time I'm ever hearing about her. The Gail Kim Taryn Terrell promo was awkwardly horrendous. I cannot actually tell you the last time that I physically forwarded through something, like actually clicked through to fast forward on a show before. I did that here. That's how bad this promo exchange was. I skipped to the point where Awesome Kong came out and killed Taryn's lackeys, which was great. And they had something really good going here, and then they ruined it by having Kong break kayfabe by talking and crying. And then Gail cried. And I tapped out with that segment. And just so no one thinks I'm biased against women's wrestling based on everything I've recapped thus far, Melina and Deonna Purrazzo for the Impact Knockouts title was really, really good. I will say right out of the gates, the ring attire looked way too similar for both women in this match. They really needed to color coordinate that better. There were portions of this match where I was looking away to type notes on my computer, and when I looked back, I had no idea which one was Melina and which one was Deonna. That's like wrestling 101 logic right there. You never dress in similar attire to your opponent. But other than that little nitpick, as a match, I thought Deonna looked good. She worked as a believable heel. Melina worked as a believable babyface in peril. They paced things well. They focused less on moves and focused more on trying to actually tell some kind of story with Melina's bad leg. They built suspense, and fucking go figure, they got the people into it. I mean, like I said, it wasn't blowaway or anything, but sure, it's better than any women's match I've seen in AEW or NXT in recent memory. So really good on these two. Deonna, I think, wrestled in NXT, didn't she? I know they didn't do jack shit with her, but man, based on her performance here, I don't know why they didn't ever push her. She had a really impressive showing here. I mean, obviously we know Melina. She's been around forever. So she obviously knows how to work an effective match. So yeah, hats off to these two. This is really good. Unfortunately, things plunged for a while. The women's tag title finals was kind of a mess. Again, a lot of clunkiness, too many illegal tags in and out. It reminded me of AEW tag matches, so I wasn't a fan of that. Right team went over, but I mean, that's about the only positive I took away from it. Medusa was actually pretty entertaining on commentary, and if you ever seen her cut promos in WCW before, you probably would remember that she's not necessarily a gifted talker, but she actually had some good lines tonight, or on Saturday night. Camille versus Layla Hirsch had some good moments, especially toward the end when the crowd got into it. I see potential in Layla. She's still really green, but there's something there. I mean, like I said, I haven't seen too many of her matches before. I know she had that qualifying match on, it was AEW. Was it Dynamite or Rampage? God, these shows blend in so much together. I know she won some kind of qualifying match and basically earned the title shot on this show. And I remember saying at the time, like, she's really tiny, but she's got like that intense kind of presence to her, so you kind of take her seriously. Um, like I said, she's a little inexperienced still, but there's something there. Problem though is that Camille just doesn't have the ring experience to be able to carry a long match. I know I made the two left feet joke earlier, but man, watching Camille wrestle, I mean, it's not great Khali bad, but it's not pretty. Her best attributes as a wrestler is power moves, but her selling's not good. Her facials are pretty generic. She doesn't really know how to play to the crowd yet, so yeah, a lot of this match just didn't work. I mean, I guess I'm in the minority because the fans got into it, but I just couldn't get into it by the end. In the main event gauntlet ranged pretty much everywhere on the spectrum from fine to downright abysmal. This was generally not a good closer for the show. Chelsea Green going over was pretty predictable given the rest of the talent pool here. I've never been high on Chelsea. I know WWE really dropped the ball with her, but I mean, in hindsight, I really didn't think she'd be booked that well anyway. I will say this, that Masha Slamovich girl was pretty good. I don't know where she came from, but if I were WWE or AEW, I'd give her a look and have her work a couple dark matches or something because she looks pretty legit. So, yeah, that was that main event. Like I said, probably not a great way to close the show. And the ending to the actual show with all the girls coming out and breaking kayfabe so they could all applaud one another and hug and cry, it really killed the show for me. I think of it this way. The whole idea here, if I'm not mistaken, is that the women want to be seen as equals to the men in wrestling, right? All right, fine. Name me one time in wrestling history, in any wrestling show, or after a pay-per-view or live event, you had every male wrestler come out to the ring, face and heel alike, and essentially give a performance bow for the crowd. Like this is a fucking ballet dance or something. Give me a break. Listen, I know this is the grumpy old wrestling fan here talking right now, but the entire subject of my article is based around the fundamental question of what was this show in the grand scheme of things? Was this a revolutionary show, or was this a Mickie James vanity project? Was this Mickie essentially going to Billy Corgan and saying, WWE wouldn't do another all-female show, so I want to do one just so I can stick it to them and put it on my resume? It's a fair question, right? So in essence, the show was done to appease Mickie and give her a sense of validation. Again, I could be wrong. Maybe I'm way off base, but I don't think I am. I mean, the show wasn't a groundbreaking event by any stretch. And I don't know. Maybe it was the perception of the show that they gave going in. Because I know Mickie came to open the show and she did that promo. I don't get it. It's like all-female pay-per-views have been done on a much greater scale with better talent, better production, and bigger audiences. It's not like women haven't been an integral part of the sports world for decades now. I don't know. Every time I see these kinds of shows and I hear these kinds of promos from the women talking about empowerment and, women's revolution and all that stuff, it feels like feminist movement garbage. And I'm so sick of that agenda. All that crap. I don't want to hear it anymore. And moreover, I didn't see the show as fitting in with the tradition of the National Wrestling Alliance. It's like, good for Mickey to get a sign-off on this. You know, how much input she had in putting the show together, I'm not really sure. But, you know, if I'm grading it on a fair scale and being a straight shooter, it wasn't good. There was one really good match, arguably two if you want to count the Camille Hirsch match, which I didn't. And the rest of the matches were lousy to passable. I liked the Gail Kim Awesome Kong thing up until the point where they had Kong break character and hug her longtime rival. I mean, at least if you're going to do the respect showmanship, at least have Kong give her a handshake, but, you know, keep the ominous stare. And that's what made Kong awesome in the first place. No pun intended. And I already mentioned how much I hated the post-main event deal with, you know, everyone going out there and hugging and crying and breaking character and just, ugh. But, you know, just generally, too, the show featured a lot of green talent. And that's what really stuck out to me. A lot of girls on there that really weren't ready for prime time. There were no hype packages or promos to build up any of the matches or the characters beforehand. You know, the announcers were solid at telling the stories throughout the matches at times, but most of the show had like an indie feel to it. And everything was just match without really any breakup of the monotony. You know, give or take a promo or two. And I know Serena Deeb's out with an injury right now, but I have no idea how Thunder Rosa wasn't booked on this show. Where the hell was she at? Why is she not represented with the AEW crossover deal? Is it because it's like she still has too many close ties with the NWA? I don't know. That was insane to me. I mean, you're gonna claim to have the best assembly of female talent on the card, and you don't have Thunder Rosa working a match? That's a huge red flag right there. But I guess we'll see how fans follow up with it. Again, the internet community has been virtually silent about the show. There was nearly no preview discussion or hype beforehand, and the post-show discussions are minimal at best. For me, it's all about follow-up. Because remember how quickly things reverted back to normal in WWE after that Evolution show? I'm just hoping they have some sort of game plan with this going forward. You know, because if it turns out this is just one of those one-stop preaching moments to remind us that women can wrestle too, I'm going to be pretty pissed about that. Because then I just wasted 2 hours of my life watching a show when I already know women can fucking wrestle. The problem isn't that women can't wrestle or that they're underappreciated or undervalued in the business. The problem is that historically and financially speaking, women do not draw like men do in this business. This is a heavily dominated male sport. And when you compare the talent level with male to female athletes in pro wrestling, sorry to say this, people, there really aren't that many great female wrestlers out there in comparison to the men. It's just the way it is. And you can bait me on it, you can fight me on it, but look at the stats, folks. There's a reason that Evolution show was the lowest rated pay-per-view in WWE history. People just don't go out of their way to watch women's wrestling on a mainstream scale. So moving on from that, I watched NWA 73. Actually, I literally just finished watching the show about 30 minutes ago, right before sitting down to record this. The overnight shift is really eating away at the wrestling life. Anybody that works the graveyard shift would know what I'm talking about. So while things are still pretty fresh in my mind, I'm going to talk about this show because there was some stuff. That is for sure. The opener was Tim Storm, Tom Latimer, and Crimson in a three-way. Crimson. My God, remember that guy? Yeah, apparently he's still around. We had Conrad Thompson on commentary for this match, and thank God I can say it was only for this match. No offense to Conrad. Seems like a nice guy. Love listening to his podcast, especially with Eric Bischoff, but let's just say if you got a bad case of insomnia, Conrad Thompson's commentary could prove to be a scientific revolutionary cure. So Crimson's making his way out to the ring. He gets jumped by a man. And it turns out this was his tag partner, Jax Dane. And the rationale we are given for this attack is apparently he was mad that Crimson was booked on the show and he wasn't. Huh. Fuck it. Yeah, he should be mad. Missing out on a paycheck? How dare the NWA? Man's probably got kids and a family to support. Unbelievable. Where's Heath Slater when you need him? And Conrad sold this supposed turn like I sold it when I dropped my coffee mug on the kitchen floor the other day. Geez, that's not good. In fact, I may have poured more emotion into that than Conrad did. Anyway, he killed Crimson with a Death Valley driver on a ladder, so that put him out for a while. And in the opening match on this NWA card, they decided to have a low-rent ECW hardcore match, minus the blood. There was plunder aplenty in this three-way mighty. They did a deal where Latimer climbed a ladder, did a senton onto Tim Storm, who was lying on a guardrail. Tim Storm is 57 years old, people. Let that sink in for a minute. Yeah, what else happened in this match? Oh, Crimson did make his way back out at one point. They did some more stuff with weapons. Crimson whipped out a belt at one point, and Tim actually grabbed a hold of the ref's belt to even the odds, which I did laugh at, I'll admit. And the finish was Tim Storm hitting the perfect Storm side slam on Crimson to get the 3, which the camera almost missed the finish entirely because as soon as Tim hit the move, the camera decided to pan over to a ring crew member, it looked like. No idea what was happening there. I mean, the match was fun. I still think Tim's an idiot for taking a senton splash through a guardrail at his age, but he came out later in the show to do commentary in a suit, so I guess he was fine. But, yeah, not my flavor of match, but it was a stark contrast to everything else on the show. So, at least they didn't blow each other up with fake pyro or drop one another face first through flaming shards of ass glass. Kylie Ray versus Mickie James. Oh boy, I get to see 2 back-to-back Kylie Ray matches in 24 hours. Yippee skippy. And I did a little research the other night. As it turns out, Kylie was the wrestler that I had speculated about wrestling in like 8 different companies and retiring every other week. And I remember this too. She was also the one that people always complained about being a bootleg Bayley. I can definitely see that comparison. I didn't think the match was half bad. I wasn't really impressed with the 3-way that Kylie was involved with at the Empowerrr show, but she looked solid here. Mickey's definitely not a spring chicken, but she did fine. They didn't do anything remarkable. Most of it was basic chain wrestling, but looked good for the most part. The transitions were smooth. There was a part where Kylie did a senton off the ropes when Mickie was nowhere near her, so that just looked bad. And Velvet Sky had a moment in this match where she was asked what it is like to be put in an armbar, and her response was something along the lines of, "It moves your arm in a place where it's not supposed to be." Yeah. Riveting. Well, to be fair, Velvet was never what you would classify as a good pro wrestler, so maybe this answer wasn't as shocking as it seemed. Mickie going over kind of felt weird. Again, I know she had a lot of influence with the women's pay-per-view they hosted the other night, but not saying there may have been some partisanship at play here in the finish decision, but just saying. It's not like Mickey's married to the world champion or anything like that. So after the match, we had the lamest wrestling trope in the last 20 years. It starts with a masked woman coming in to jump Mickie after the bell, only to then rip off her hood and mask to reveal that it's Deonna Purrazzo. To which I ask, what in the fuck do you need the mask for? If you're going to reveal your identity less than a minute after the attack, why do you need to conceal yourself? Just come out in street clothes and do the attack. It would make literally no difference. So that was the thing. I mean, Deonna did have a hell of a match with Melina at the Empowerrr pay-per-view, so I won't crap on the Afterbirth entirely. You know, she's going to be part of the company going forward based on her performance the other night. I'm not opposed. You know, if Thunder Rosa isn't going to be in the picture anymore, Deonna's certainly not a bad sub. Jordan Clearwater, some dude called the Masked Man, and Tyrus versus the team of The End and the Pope. The End? The end of what? The end of good professional wrestling team names? Good to see the Pope again, man. Fucking love that guy in TNA years ago. Boy, did they drop the ball with that dude. Should have been the world champion. He looks good. Can't imagine he's the youngest guy in the world now either, but he's still moving just as good as he did when I saw him 10 or so years ago. How old is he? I'll look it up real quick because I'm actually curious about that. In my Google engine here. No, not Pope Francis, Google. Let's try the Pope wrestler. There we go. Yeah, Elijah Burke. He is 40. Yeah, still looks great. Granted, I hate the name The End for a team, but yeah, the Odison and Pero duo, they look pretty good. I'm surprised WWE isn't eyeing these guys for a contract. Oh yeah, that's right, they're not scouting for indie talent anymore. Match was fine. Yeah, pretty basic tag match. Tyrus controlled a lot of the heat portion of the match. Went up and missed a diving splash. One of the End teammates, I think it was Pero, he got a hot tag and ran wild. And long story short, skip to the End. The End hit a double powerbomb move on the Faces. And then some dude named Black G's came out. Who? And, well, one of the End dudes chased him up the ramp. Tyrus attacked the other End dude. And then the Masked Man tagged himself in and stole the pin from Tyrus. Not my favorite match on the show. That's all I'll say about it. Chris Adonis versus James Storm for the National Heavyweight Championship. Nice little nostalgia trip seeing James Storm again. Another guy that should have been a world champion at one point. It was poorly mismanaged. This wasn't bad. Maybe boring's the best way to describe it. I always liked Storm's work, but looking back, I don't think Adonis was a good dance partner for him here. And Storm did make a good fiery babyface comeback toward the end, and he did get the crowd into it somewhat. They did the deal where Adonis takes a swig of Storm's beer, but Storm hits the last call, thinks he gets the pinfall, but Adonis gets his foot in the ropes to wave off the call. And Storm starts arguing with the ref, and Adonis rolls him up to steal the pin with his feet in the ropes. Lame finish, but, you know, if the idea is they're going to eventually build up to Storm winning the title, then it was fine. And again, I didn't really write a whole lot about it. Match was inoffensive, but just not exciting. Then we got the Ric Flair promo. And boy, was this a Ric Flair promo. Basically, the best way I could sum it up is Billy Corgan gave this dude the keys to the Chevy, and Flair took that son of a bitch on a joyride for the ages. He talked forever. He talked about St. Louis history, talked about Harley Race, talked about WWE, a lot actually. Talked about Triple H, talked about Shawn Michaels, talked about The Undertaker, talked about Steve Austin, and just a whole laundry list of dudes. He started telling WWF stories, talked about how Vince didn't want Flair to get back in the ring when he signed, but ended up having him wrestle within the first 6 months. Talked about wrestling Harley and Bruiser Brody, and, you know, all the guys that he previously mentioned grew up on the NWA and grew to appreciate it for being the sport that it was. Name drop Tony Khan in AEW, and he essentially said the quiet part out loud. The fact that WWE is not the be-all, end-all anymore, and wrestlers basically have the ability to choose where they want to go and work. I mean, I can't do the promo justice. I mean, it was quite the spectacle. If you did not watch it live, try to find a clip of it somewhere, or go watch the show on Fight TV, like find a replay or something, just at least for the Flair promo alone. I wouldn't say that it was better than the Punk return promo on Rampage. I would say it was on par. I mean, if anything, you could definitely tell that it was a passionate promo. If you followed his story with WWE over the last couple of years, you can definitely tell how genuine this came across live. I mean, Flair just really did not want to be associated with that company anymore. And I don't blame him. They didn't treat him right. He just didn't seem like he had a passion to be there, so yeah. The way that they departed, I don't know the whole backstory on how that departure went, if Flair and Vince went off on good terms, if they're on bad terms. I really don't know. I'd have to dig in a little deeper, but like I said, Flair looked a lot happier here. This was the Ric Flair that everyone wanted to see for a long time, and I think we actually got that here. And it basically came across as like a one and done type deal. Flair essentially said that he was going to meet with Tony later in the week to talk. So, if you have half a brain, you can pretty much see where that's going. So then we had this gauntlet battle royal to determine the number one contender for the NWA World title. And, well, I wasn't sure what to expect, considering they didn't announce anyone in the graphic beforehand. So eventually dudes just start filing down to the ring. Most of them were the undercard geeks on the roster, it looked like. And then some dude named Judas makes a surprise 13th entry with Father James Mitchell. And the announcers sold this like I was apparently supposed to know who he was. I had no idea who he was. I know who James Mitchell is. I presume the Judas fella wrestled for TNA at some point. But I mean, I couldn't find anything on him. Didn't have a wiki link, couldn't find any clips of him on YouTube, nothing. And the match was what it was. I've already been on record talking about how I really don't like multi-man matches in pro wrestling. Battle royals are usually boring and uneventful until the last 2 or 3 wrestlers are in there. And unfortunately, there really weren't any guys in this match worth rooting or getting behind. They did a standing multi-man vertical suplex at one point, but that was really the only notable spot I would consider. There was a spot, too, where Luke Hawx almost got killed by a stacked-up superplex. Just really dangerous and reckless. So it ended up coming down to JTG and Judas. They wrestled for a few minutes. It ended with JTG on the apron, and Judas, I wrote here, he attempted a springboard dropkick, and I maintain that statement because it was merely an attempt. It did not look good. So he kicked JTG off the apron, and he won. So their number one contender to the world's title is some guy named Judas, as my notes read, who just so happens to have James Mitchell as his manager. Cool. Considering who won in the main event, I guess it makes sense. Chelsea Green versus Camille for the NWA Women's title. So for anyone that did not see the women's show the other night, Chelsea won that Gauntlet Invitational in the main event and earned a title match. It's interesting because I watched both Camille title matches back to back, and the crowd was more into her match with Layla at the Empowerrr show, but I honestly think Camille looked much better in this match with Chelsea. Maybe part of it had to do with the fact that Chelsea's had enough ring experience to know what she's kind of working with in there. So she tried to play to Camille's strengths, which, let's be frank, are few and far between. There were a lot of elements about this match that looked better. The pacing was better. They played up the story with Camille working over Chelsea's broken wrist, which, if you remember, pretty much ended her WWE run abruptly. So there was good attention to detail there. Camille ended up tapping out Chelsea with some kind of submission hold. Match was all right. Didn't really have any complaints about it. Again, I never really got the hype of Chelsea Green. I know a lot of people thought WWE poorly mismanaged her, and maybe they did. I mean, she really didn't do enough to make an impression either way. But I look at it this way. If she's going to stick with NWA long term, maybe this will be a better spot for her. La Rebellion versus Aaron Stevens and Kratos for the NWA World Tag titles with Conan. Fucking Stevens coming out to the Hallelujah chorus. I love it. And he was sporting the old Damien Sandow attire. Nice flashback. Again, as a match, I don't have a whole lot I wrote down. Pretty standard stuff as far as action went. La Rebellion are actually a good athletic duo, but, they aren't Lucha Bros ridiculous where everything they do are just dives and flips with no rhyme or reason. So even though I was kind of skeptical hearing that they were a crossover team from AAA, I appreciated that they actually tried to work some semblance of an American-style wrestling tag match. They ended up winning the belts in the end, and I haven't watched NWA since they shut down from the pandemic, so I guess it's fair to say I never had an investment either way in which team went over, but the match was competently worked. Both teams looked good, so while I was ambivalent about the title change, the match was good either way. But the main event of the show is really what mattered most. It's Trevor Murdoch versus Nick Aldis for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. And Aldis had won the title from Cody, and I believe his title reign is the longest title reign in the modern era, right? Because Walter was NXT UK champion for 870 days. I think it was. But Aldis beat Cody for the NWA belt like 3 years ago. So, yeah, it's been well over 1,000 days at this point. And granted, I've only seen a handful of Aldis' title matches since then, but I also believe he's the second longest reigning NWA World Champion since Dan Severn won the title in... what year was it? Gotta pull out my history helmet for a moment there. I know it was in the early to mid-90s. I'll look it up later because I don't want to be wrong. I think it was 94 when Severn won the belt. Anyway, they really went out to treat this like an important world title main event. They did the special ring introduction with Robert King, laying out the rules, brought up the history of both men working and training with Harley Race. I really liked that. They did the pre-match crowd brawl, ended up on the stage where Aldis and Corgan almost got into a battle of fisticuffs. They eventually got back and pretty much wrestled an old-school style main event title match. Aldis beat on Murdoch forever while Murdoch sold and sold. He made a couple short comebacks, but quickly got cut off at every pass. They traded submission holds at one point, which the crowd popped for. Aldis did every heel trick in the book. And I'll say this about Aldis, because I know people kind of run hot and cold with him. Say what you want, but you can tell that Nick Aldis watched his NWA tapes. All right, maybe not tapes necessarily, but you get my drift. I mean, this man clearly studied the Territorial and Crockett promotion wrestling footage. Just everything he does, from his movesets to his facials, to his pacing, to his ability to, garner heat from the crowd, his execution of everything. Like, he gets it. Like, I always knew Nick Aldis was going to be a big star from watching him really hone his craft in TNA, but I didn't think he'd ever get on this level. So they did the obligatory ref bump that you would come to expect in these types of matches. Aldis ended up giving Murdoch a beautiful-looking elbow drop through a table on the outside, which I was quivering in fear. Trevor was going to break that table under his weight, but he didn't. So eventually they built up to the false finishes, and unlike most companies now where they do all the big moves and false finishes in the first 3 minutes of the match, they actually waited until the end to do the false finishes here. So, surprise, surprise, it fucking meant something. Aldis hit a tombstone at one point, but Trevor kicked out. He had a diving elbow, but Trevor kicked out. Aldis ended up getting Trevor in the Texas Cloverleaf at one point, and Trevor worked to get the rope break. The crowd's into all of this, by the way. And again, like I said, they took their time with the moves instead of rushing through everything, so you actually had time to digest it before the transitions. It's like, if only these companies had agents with a clue, they could figure this crap out. And at the end, they did the 1-2 punch exchange, which was really good. Murdoch got Aldis with a pile driver. Crowd's going crazy for this. He goes up top, he hits the bulldog, and he gets the pin to win the title. And the crowd goes crazy for the finish. The announcer sold it like a big deal. Murdoch's family jumped in the ring to celebrate. The kids are in tears. Everyone was on their feet. I'll tell you this. You asked me 5 or 6 years ago what my thoughts would be on the idea of a Nick Aldis-Trevor Murdoch NWA title match. I probably would have thought nothing of it. But goddamn it if I didn't say that this is a hell of a main event title match. And imagine that. They didn't have to do 1,800 flips and dives and land on the back of their heads and necks to get it over. Everything they did here, it had build to it. It had purpose. They hit their high spots when they mattered the most. They paced everything like a traditional wrestling match should be paced. They got the people invested. If I were anyone in AEW or WWE right now, I'd be watching this match. If I was an agent in that company, I'd be sitting your roster down and saying, watch this and learn how to work an effective pro wrestling match. And look, I understand this is not going to be everyone's cup of tea. I know some people are going to look at this and think, Trevor Murdoch's the new NWA World Champion? Whoop-de fucking do. And granted, would he have been my first pick to beat Aldis for the title? No, probably not. But, whatever. The story was there. The build was there. The timing was right. I'd say capitalize while you have the momentum. It's not like he's going to have a 4-year run with the title or beat every major star in the book or anything like that. But in the grand scheme of things, this is probably the second most effective title change I've seen in a wrestling match this year, aside from the Walter Ilya Dragunov match at TakeOver last weekend. And, while I certainly enjoyed the Walter Dragunov match more, I think it had more drama to it. This was easily one of my favorite pro wrestling matches I've seen this year, too. And I didn't think I'd say that at all. A Trevor Murdoch match being one of my favorite matches of the year in 2021. The mighty have fallen. I mean, it's not going to get like 6.5 stars on the Meltzer scale or anything, but shit, it was the best match I saw all weekend, that's for sure. So that was a great way to close the show. And Flair coming down to endorse him afterwards and put over the title win, that was a nice touch. Like I said, the goal was to treat this like it mattered. And the lead up, the video package beforehand, the storytelling, the execution, I think they pulled this off. And I guess we'll see what they do with all this going forward. Like I said, I don't think Murdoch is going to have a lengthy title reign. Truthfully, I wouldn't be shocked at all to see Aldis win the belt back at some point. But it's a new direction for them creatively right now. It gives me a reason to want to watch Power to see what happens. So good on them. They built something up for television. Or their YouTube show, sorry. I really need to adapt my terms to the modern times here in wrestling. I guess we can eliminate the word tapes from the history books because you're never really going to hear that again. And with that said, everyone, that'll do it for this episode. Definitely not as buzzworthy as last weekend in terms of wrestling content, but there was a decent amount to talk about with this one. If you liked what you heard and you want to stay posted for more content, again, make sure you subscribe and click the bell icon to stay notified of when uploads go up. Again, that's twice a week. We got Monday and Friday editions here on the FSWR podcast. And while you're at it, make sure you give this video a like and leave a comment, whatever's on your mind. Let me know what show you enjoyed the most, your favorite moments, favorite matches, least favorite, all that stuff. Positive, negative, I don't care. Comment below. And I'll be back on Friday for the NXT Dynamite Report. Take care, all. Peace out.